I help people make money from video games, and I do that by helping big companies with their strategy. I do that by helping small companies think about which platforms to work on, which business models to use, which ways to make money. And I do that by helping companies on individual projects work out how to get customers, how to keep customers, and how to make money from customers. So clients I've had include, on the big end, I've worked with companies like Square Enix and Atari in the game sector. I've worked with Channel 4 and IPC Media, who are the largest magazine publisher in the UK. And then at smaller end, I've worked with a company called Firefly, who makes a series of games based on castles called Stronghold. And I've worked with a company called Endreams, who's particularly active in PlayStation Home. It's a transition period. It's really, really tough to be making money for AAA consoles. AAA being the term for games which are expensive, which you buy in a retail store, where the budget can be $20 million plus. And I think it's a really hard time to be making those. If you're an independent game developer, I would be focusing on two things. I'd be focusing on a game where you built a direct relationship with your customer. So that's particularly good on Facebook, on iPhone, on tablets, on Android. If your skills are in that place, PlayStation Network and Xbox Live Arcade are interesting. Xbox Live makes it very difficult for indies to go direct to market there. So my focus to you would be, if I had to pick one, it would be smartphones, specifically iPhone. More broadly, anything where you have a direct relationship with the end consumer. There has never been a better time to be a content creator in games, or I think anywhere. It used to be the case that the only way to get published, to get your game in front of a consumer, was to persuade a large corporation to pay you to make that game, and then they would take the challenge of distributing it and selling it. The problem with that was that those large corporations don't like taking risks. They have so much money vested in the channel that it's really hard to invest in either new talent or in new concepts. That's been totally turned around by the emergence of platforms like Facebook, like iPhone, like the broader web, and indeed technologies like Unity and other middleware, which enable you to make games much more cheaply and get them out to an audience much more cheaply. Here at the Expo, we've got the Indiecade, which has got several people who are in their early 20s with games which they've conceived, written, released, and made money from, all on their own. And that would have been not quite impossible 10 years ago, but pretty close to. The opportunities are widening unless what you want to do is make AAA games that appear on the PlayStation 3, the Xbox 360 and the Wii. If you want to make those games, the number of jobs which exist in those platforms is shrinking. There are fewer, bigger games. That's what we're going to see over the next 5 years, 10 years. The Battlefields, the Modern Warfares, these kind of games are going to be bigger budgets. They're going to be competitive. But the sort of the also-rans, the games which might sell 500,000 and 1.5 million units, which sounds like a lot, it's hard to break even on those. There are going to be fewer and fewer of those. So if the thing that you want to be is a cog in a machine of 200 people making the next blockbuster title, there are fewer jobs in that area. If what you want to do is make games, by hook or by crook you want to make games, the opportunities are much wider than they were even 5 years ago. So I think the emergence of social networks, smartphones and tablets are doing two different things. They're opening the number of people who are gamers. The number of people who play games has expanded massively. But it's also making it possible to make a better living with a game which sold fewer units or generated less amounts of money. Part of that is the obvious issues that you don't have to pay for a retail store, you don't have to pay for the physical cost of pressing a disc, you don't have to pay the royalties to a console manufacturer. But the other is the not often thought about thing, what bankers call capital intensity or working capital usage. If you're going to press 1 million copies of a game, you need £7 million just to get that game into the shops. And if nobody buys it, leaving aside the marketing cost, leaving aside the dev cost, that stuff gets buried in the Nevada desert. In the digital world, that doesn't happen. So it's actually, you need much, much less money to get off the ground in the first place. How do I get a job in gaming? The answer is just make games. That's the one thing that you have to do. I gave a talk at the Edinburgh Interactive Entertainment Festival earlier this month. The slides are up on SlideShare under slideshare.net/Gamesbrief. I'll do that again. The talk I gave at Edinburgh Interactive earlier this year is on how to get a job in games. The slides are available at slideshare.net/gamesbrief. And the real focus of that is that every person I've spoken to in the industry says that if they get somebody who comes through the door with a great CV, or if they get somebody who comes through the door with a game that you can play that they have published, the person with a game that they have written and finished goes right to the top of the pile. The list is essentially, have you got a game? Have you got good qualifications? Everybody else. Everybody else doesn't get a look in. Qualifications count. Making a game counts for more. So what does that mean? It doesn't have to have been successful. It just has to have been out there. If you are in a position to find people who are artists, if you're a programmer, or programmers if you're an artist to work with, and you haven't got a game up on Newgrounds, you haven't got a game up on the App Store, you haven't got a game up on Android, people are going, you've had 3 or 4 years to make games. Games aren't that complex to make anymore. They're still difficult, but you can do it. I want you to have gone through the pain of finishing something. I want you to have gone through the pain of the publishing process, possibly even want you to have gone through the pain of acknowledging the emotional pain of people not liking your game, which is an important part of any creative industry. If you have any desire to make games, like if you have desires to be a writer, like if you have desires to be a filmmaker, you should start by just making stuff. So the question of whether or not remote working is going to work well in games is a complex one. Unequivocally, highly skilled people who know what they're doing can work well together remotely. But we're also talking here about people who are learning their craft and finding the right way of doing that learning. I don't think that people all need to be in a studio together. I am of the view that having a cluster of people who you can network with and share with adds extra value. So for example, there are clusters in Dundee, there's obviously a big cluster in London, clusters in Brighton, clusters in Guildford, all sorts of other places. Now, you can be somewhere where you travel in once a month to go to the local booze up, frankly, to talk to other people in the same space as you are. And that networking and sharing is important for getting work, it's important for sharing skills, it's important for not being trapped in a kind of ghetto of your own making. On the other hand, the actual work, absolutely, that can be done remotely. In fact, there's an argument that for people who have to create, the opportunity to find at least 4 hours of solitude every day when you can get your head down, turn off email, turn off Twitter, turn off your phone and just get something done is hugely powerful to productivity. So the thing which I notice most is that if you want to make games, you now have to understand the business of games. This wasn't true even only 5 years ago. 5 years ago, there was essentially one business of games. A studio made a game, somebody else was responsible for making money from it. That now isn't the case. So I would like to see people coming through university, through training, through placements, through everything, who understand how design consequences affect revenue opportunities, who have seen firsthand what it's like to take a game to the App Store, to watch sales, to do experiments with their own products about pricing, about marketing, about promotion and those elements. Now, I'm not actually sure that needs, so I think there is value in that being taught at universities, but more importantly, if you are serious about working in the games industry, there are a lot of other people who are also serious about working in the games industry. What you need to do is find a way to make those games and learn the skills around the edges of development, which mark you out as either more valuable for an employee or realizing that you can make a living doing this in your early 20s because you tried. 5 years in the games industry is an incredibly long time. 5 years ago, the iPhone didn't exist. 5 years ago, Facebook games were brand new. 5 years ago, Zynga, an American social games company, was formed. It's now estimated to be worth over $10 billion. So it's a very brave man who says what the games industry is going to look like in 5 years. There are some predictions I would make. People will still be making money on console games, but it will be fewer of them. The bets will be bigger, and you'll have to be very happy taking very big risks. The future I would focus on is in games which are free, games which work really hard to build a community, and games which find ways to make the people who love what they do spend $1, $10, $100 on that game over time, rather than going, up front you've got to pay $40 even to enter my world.